Couple of things if you've never been to the work group for the internet tracking. When we meet in person, it's more like a think tank. We tried to, with normally a vast audience, we try to inform you what the group is up to, and we try to find direction from you. So nothing's going to change. We're going to try that again today. We have an agenda. We'll go over a little bit of what we've done to get you up to date, and then we'll go over a couple of agenda items we want to talk about. And then halfway through, right around 2 o'clock, we're going to do a presentation from List Track's going to come on up. Ada Hassan out there, the product manager out there, is going to show you what they're doing, and you can Q&A him on some of the trials and tribulations that they have and what they do in their tracking solution. So to get started, I love comic strips. Showed this the other day. I showed it again. You know, they're so great because without doing all the technobabble, these comic strips can make you focus and make you think. And remember what we're doing here. We were tasked to come up with a resource for the data dictionary that tackles the world of tracking. Tracking is happening all the time in all of your products, in all of the industries that we represent. We wanted to provide a highway where that information can be shared so that a plethora of analytic information can be presented to the decision makers quickly and with ease. And that's kind of the goal of the standard and the fields that we've been working on. This is a great example of a couple of people saying that they know exactly what to do. They have all the information. They know what's going on with their customers. And there's the one dude who says, okay, cool, let's look at the data. Callie's got to look at the data. So you guys know all about that, and that's kind of why you're here. This is a really cool image we drew when we started this journey. Nothing has changed. You know, I'm going to try to, so the red server we've had for years, we're spitting out data constantly. We're feeding the IDX vendors, we're feeding the public websites. But now we want data back to track the end users, to find out how it's doing on all those different sites. And that's basically the logic where we started. And then from there, fancy visual representations of the data can be made so that decisions can be well informed. So that's kind of the goal. That's what we've been doing for 2.5 years. And it's been a really interesting and great collaboration. Collaboration to me is something that's infectious. It's something that's when the wheels start turning, when the sleeves get rolled up, it's a great thing to be part of the ride. This is what we have. I mean, these are the rock stars today. This is the field. If you have Data Dictionary 1.6 in your repertoire, you have a resource now that says Internet Tracking, and this is what you'll see. We have 4 different classes that the fields are put into. There's the event class, there's the actor class. So the event class focuses on the actual end user activity, what they're trying to do. The actor class talks about the person or the entity that's doing that action, normally a consumer. And then the last class is an object class. The fields there focus on the object. Is the object a listing? Is the object a property? Is the object an open house? That's kind of what we've been up to. That's what we've published. And that came out earlier this year. So to start off, like I always do, a little bit of a progress report. If you haven't been calling in every month, that's okay. Shout out to all those people who call in every month, though, the monthly warriors. You know who you are. You guys and girls are amazing, and I really appreciate your participation. You're fully vested in it, and it makes our job easy. I know it's not easy to volunteer every month. I know it's hard. It's hard for me. Sometimes I put together an agenda, and I think it's just going to be a piece of turd or a pooid, I guess. And then the meeting comes out awesome. And then for me, the meeting going 61 minutes is an awesome thing. As the facilitator, if we can get 61 minutes of content from you guys and participation, that's a win. But then sometimes I think the agenda is going to be great, and then it doesn't. So, but yeah, it's not easy volunteering either way. So I appreciate it from my side. There we are, RISA Data Dictionary 1.6. We are live. That happened this year. That was really cool. Earlier in the year. That's the first step of implementation. You got to get there first. You got to build the roads. And now it's up to the MLS vendors. It's up to the public website utilities, or whatever you want to call them, the consumer portals to take action. It's up to the brokerage firms to put some pressure on these vendors to give them this data, so they can look at analytic information from California to New York, from Florida to Texas. So that's kind of where we're at. Implementation is a hard thing. On our side, we're going to try to arm you guys and girls with the necessary tools you need, which right now is information. For the ones that weren't part of the work group, white papers are what's going to be coming out of us that's going to try to help you. There's going to be some developers somewhere that's going to be tasked with doing internet tracking, and they're going to know, what the heck do I got to do? 101 white papers that we're going to have published in our work group page are going to help those poor individual souls. We also tackled transport. So we got these fields defined. We got them in fancy classes. We look like we're doing a lot of work, but how do we transport them around? In spring, we took great direction from the audience on marrying ourselves with the Transport Web API, and that's exactly what we did. We didn't go out and venture and create our own, although that was on the agenda. We decided it was a nice cohesive move to just tag along with the OData train, as difficult as it may be for some, and just become part of that world, and we did. And that's great. Since we were in 1.6, we're also in the Web API as well. There's some little bit of things along the road, like internet tracking has a space, so we had to get rid of that space because endpoints, as you know, sometimes don't work great with spaces. There's an example for you data tech heads of an OData filtered call that uses internet tracking that'll get you the detailed views for a particular listing in 2017. So something simple like that, an API call will bring you back some JSON that you can have fun with, do whatever you want to do, take it out to dinner, whatever you normally do with JSON. We also tackled the right. We heard from the community, specifically this guy right here, I think, that besides pushing it out, we got to take it in, man. We got to have it writable. So we again went to the OData gods and looked at their work, and what they do there in OData land is input, believe, and update type of commands are handled via post. So if you do a lot of web work, you're familiar with doing posting. There's an example of a basic jQuery post with an end URL that's going to be part of our work group. So that's it in action. I mean, in the real world, that's going to be what it looks like. We came up with new objects. We've been really working hard this year. I've been really surprised. We came up with saved searches. You know, objects in our worlds are the things that need to be tracked. In the field of real estate data, there's a saved search everywhere. Consumer sites, MLS sites, mom and pop sites. The ability for the consumer to save their search is important. There's trackable evidence there that would make life easier. So we created that in object. You can now record when a saved search has been invented, when it's been deleted, when it's been modified, when it's been sent to the client. That's all analytic information that we've kind of built to pave the road out there for vendors to jump on. We haven't really heard from anybody who's doing that internally, so we're a little bit ahead on that, which we like. Open house, property are pretty self-explanatory. They have their own information, that analytic information. And with open house specifically, maybe in the next coming year, we'll look at talking about the physical aspect. We have fields and data that relate to the digital aspect of an open house, but what about the physical side, where the realtors have a list where people actually visit? There's metadata that they actually track in their back office systems that we can probably provide for them, at least a way for them to share it. Photos and documents and virtual tours kind of marries the data dictionary resources. They're in there. We felt compelled to provide analytic information subsets just for that alone. A photo itself has a whole, a different type of array, a type of analytic information you can record, so it deserves its own object type. And that we voted on just as recent as last month, so those are fresh. You won't see those in 1.6 though, unfortunately. We're married to the data dictionary release and versioning, but you can obviously keep up with the work group on Confluence and put it in your own solution and be ahead when it does get published in 1.7. There's our white paper with my serious guy face. Actually, that's my smiley face. Read it when you can if you haven't been in the work groups. And that's just one of them. You know, that just talks about the 101 of how to get the stuff up and running, of what we expect, what the work group expects. If you find stuff in there you can't stand, if you find stuff in there you hate, pick up the phone on our third Wednesday of every month and tell us, and we'll take care of it. That's how this collaborative effort works, and it's pretty simple. The next white paper we're going to push is more of a technical end. How do you handle big data? Because a lot of small shops haven't been too familiar with big data. If you're already in the cloud and you're doing stuff with BigQuery and you're going to be fine. But when we're talking terabytes of information daily, it can be overwhelming to a few. So we're going to try to help that. Again, we're just going to try to have your back as you go through this journey. Now we reached the part of our work group where we ask for your direction. You know, today's a think tank. I'm sorry if you thought we were just going to have me talk and You know, I can talk all about the Cubs game last night and how I was sad and depressed in San Diego, and how the heck are we gonna beat them tonight? We gotta win tonight, people. But unfortunately, it's more about internet tracking. So we have a few things to talk about on the agenda. Device fingerprinting. So this is something that came up in spring, and about the need of being able to help identify end users as they go from one real estate website to another. The marketing world has had this in their hands for years, via UTMs, via cookies, via whatever they do. But the real estate world doesn't have it. So the question came up, this is the work group to talk about it. This is the work group that can try to handle it. So we've kind of bantered around about it in our monthly calls, and we've kind of punted here and there. We've had some ideas, but I thought today would be a good time to talk formally with the group, get some direction, have some feedback, and have at it. So a couple of things about device fingerprinting, and I have some cheat notes here. So when we talk about this concept of identifying a user from one website to another, we're talking anonymous information. We don't want to have liability. You know, we don't want to identify gender. We don't want to identify names. We don't identify anything that could be in a personal nature. The idea of this is that somebody could just understand that a single user went from the MLS to a portal to Bob's Homes Listings and porkchops.com to Zillow, but not knowing who that end user is. The idea is trying to track activity and trying to understand from that. Zillow is one of the most popular websites in the world. We know they have tons of traction, but wouldn't it be nice to know that maybe 10% of people go from Zillow, not to Trulia, but they go from Zillow to Bob's Pork Chops and Listings? And why do they do that? So, you know, this sort of information, I think, could be valuable to that community. It could be valuable to the brokerage firms. It could be valuable to a lot. So we're talking about anonymous information. So how do you do that? I thought it'd be really cool to play a game. So a couple of things we could do is like this computer right here. So we're talking about device fingerprinting. So we're not going to identify me as Chris, Cubs fan, beer drinker. We're going to identify me as this. This is a computer. So the experts out there say that you can solely tell somebody just from the technology that they use today. I think this guy's going to have a lot of knowledge on that. But from what I've read, it's doable, and it will provide a result. Now remember, we're not going to be 100%. This is a science. Analytic information is never 100%. But it's going to be a good conclusion is what we're shooting for. So this device right here has an IP address and has a user agent. So those are two things. When I go on the internet on this device, those are two things that are mostly going to be there. Those of you that don't understand that, I mean, that's every time you go to a website, there's a request you're making. There's already a standard there that has been set, W3C. They meet kind of like RISO, and they make these standards and browsers that are compatible. Microsoft even, provide that information. And web servers suck that up and record it when it's available. So by IP and by my browser version, or which is called a user agent, right there you can identify me. Now let's play a game and pretend this dude right there from FBS, he's got a Mac too. So he's got a same IP address, right? Because we're from the same hotel. He's using the same browser and version. Maybe not, but we're still pretty close together. So how can we single identify myself versus that guy right there? One of the things that crossed my mind is remote port. So when we are going out on the internet, we are using ports. So I'm not a networking genius. Anybody in the room know about remote ports and want to talk about it? Is that something that we might be separate, or are we always going to be using the same port?
You have a separate one.
Separate one?
When you create a connection between your client and the server, you generate a socket, and the socket is based off of the destination of the server port and usually a pseudo-random port that your client will
Cool.
So the bad news is that your port is going to change one request to the next.
So, well, that was another thing that came up. So what if we're not talking about trying to track people over days maybe, but how about sessions? Like, you know, one request to the next, the port will change. Cool. Everybody can hear? Should I pass the mic around? All right. Cool. All right, so I guess that's out. Anybody want to argue it's not out? How about these things? Now, that was the last server-side thing I could come up with, but I'm an idiot. I'm a facilitator. I know nothing. You guys are the geniuses. You're the shakers. So Server side, I couldn't really think of much more that it records than those things. So think about that server side and what you can throw at me. So now I'm going to the client side. Now when we go to the client side, that becomes a shop issue. So depending on what this shop does and the other shop does, client side is going to be different because you're talking about getting the data however you program your system. I personally would look at JavaScript. Somebody else might use some other type of method. But with that in mind, on the client side, how about screen resolution, operating system, window size, time zone, color depth, and my favorite, the plugins. Now you take all that information, especially the plugins. I bet with plugins alone, you and I are going to be different. And I bet over a period of time, you and I are going to be identifiable. And they'll never know that we're guys, which is great. They won't ever know our names. They won't even know our region, although you can do IP address by region. And that's good. That's not definite. That's going to be more protective. They're just going to know we're from San Diego if we're not using a proxy or something crazy like that. So actually, that information I think is going to be pretty cool. Are we closer to the universal ID when we use client side? What do you think? You like that? Do you want to talk?
I mean, that's kind of there are a variety of different standards for fingerprinting, and that is.
Yeah, I pressed it. Just put it close.
That is
Think of it.
a combination of all those client-side variables from screen resolution, plugins, etc.
Testing. Yeah, it's not on. Wait. He nodded his head. I think that means it's okay. I don't know. All right, so Ada Hassan, our presenter coming up soon with his rockin' program with 100,000 domains that they monitor, he says yes. So, but is that enough? So by screen resolution, operating system, window size, any of this you think is wrong, time zone, color depth, and plugins. I mean, so here's what I'm getting at. When I showed that screen of our fields of actor, we have this stuff already, some of it. So look at those actor fields. We have the IP address, and we have the user agent. It should be there. If I was probably half asleep. Okay, cool. So with that in mind, all we have to do is add some more actor fields that would relate to this. We would add screen resolution, operating system, window size, time zone, color depth, plugins. Now plugins install would be weird. We probably want to store that in some type of comma delimited field or long field. I don't know. We have to talk that out. But is that the way we can go? And also keep in mind, we're out of the box opt-in. If somebody does not want to do this, they don't have to. We're just creating the fields out there that they can if they want to. So, anybody have any thoughts on all of that? Yes, in the back.
I was just going to say, a lot of the client-side aspects that you're describing are typically aggregated in what's known as super cookies. And the disadvantage there is
Thanks.
there's so much information that you often...
Sorry.
Thank you. I don't know how much you could hear before, but a lot of the client-side attributes that were just being discussed are aggregated in what's known as super cookies. The disadvantage there with one of the key goals is the lack of anonymity. If you include too many of them, you can actually very consistently, uniquely identify users. So there's going to be some fine balance that I'm not going to know from the hip in terms of deciding what fields to submit from that in. But it certainly lends itself to device fingerprinting.
Would you say less is more is a good idea? Like just start with screen resolution, operating system, window size? Yeah. Time zone, I think, is kind of redundant, right? Maybe because IP address will show me time zone if I do it like most people. What was that?
If you know that long, you know the time.
Great. So time zone is redundant. How about color depth versus screen resolution? To me, that seems redundant. Has anybody played around with that? Those types of data on the client side? Operating system is a pretty good one, and that's something that you could grab from the client. And what about the plugins? I mean, that's kind of the holy grail to me. I think a person, even with the same identical desktop, the same identical operating system, the plugins that are active at the time. And again, you're going to have false positives. I'm going to turn off my plugins from once in a while because they irritate me, or I'm going to change as from time to time. So, but I think plugins is a good direction. Any thoughts? Now that I'm back all the way up here, and you guys in the back? No? Yes, Ken.
I know.
I don't need it.
I know, for example, when I go to my bank, okay, when I go to my bank website, it knows whether I'm on the same browser as I was on the last time, which way, because I can access it from my work machine, I can access it from my laptop, my home desktop, whatever, but it knows when I talk to the bank, it says, I don't recognize that device, or I don't recognize that browser that you're on, type of thing, and so it goes me through another layer of security in it. So what does the bank in that respect, what are those people with that type of security, what are they tracking? Is that the super cookie that you're talking about, whatever? I mean,
For a bank, it could be as simple as a cookie.
But it's not anonymous.
In this case, yeah,
Yeah, you're using your credentials first.
you should answer Bob then.
Yeah. Yeah, thinking.
Information, like I say, the browser and other information like that,
They're keeping track of the addresses that you came from on the internet the last time you connected, but because they didn't do the work before you connected the first time, when you answered your additional security questions and that kind of stuff, they just said, oh, this is where he's from in the past, this is his phone, this is his home machine, this is his work machine. And they'll keep a couple addresses for each individual, but they've attached those to you already. In the case that we're talking about, it may not be an agent or someone that has authenticated with the REST platform themselves. It could be an IDX feed, it could be anything.
And
Yeah.
further, they have to put a cookie onto your browser, that your browser will give back to them at your very next request. We're talking about tracking events that go between domains, like going from your MLS, say, portal or Zillow. Zillow isn't going to get your MLS cookie.
Right.
We tell them to do it.
Yeah, the banks might, well, first of all, every bank's going to be different, and then, but I think when I come across that, I notice when I clear my cache that it doesn't notice my device. So that tells me right away it's some type of cookie. Or, but you know what, device fingerprinting for them makes sense. I'm sure anybody work for a bank want to plug them right now. If they do it that way.
The other question I have
yeah.
is, do we imagine storing each of these data elements as a separate field in the actor, or will we just prescribe some formula to produce a code
Yeah.
and just track you like that?
Yeah, I think you presented that in one of our monthly calls, and I like that idea, and we would all vote on it. But I think that's the goal. Maybe provide the fields that encapsulates the ability to identify a user uniquely, and then some type of hash formula that would come out with an equation. Is that what you're getting at, or? And then if everybody just does that hash, yeah. Well, yeah, I guess. Then you could decompose it the hard way.
We're not looking at finding out who's using what screen resolution. We're just trying to identify a user anywhere from Zillow back to their MLS.
Yeah, that's true. And if you're doing the exact same formula that Riso is going to put a stamp on, the hash you should end up should be the same. But then there's some deconstructing.
What about changing devices, though? That's a case where you need to be able to deconstruct it. Like if you were trying to, if the user went from their phone to their desktop.
Yeah. Yeah, then that would be,
How would you ever, I don't know.
yeah, the universal tracking only works, I think, if you're consistent on the same device. Like every morning I get up and I look at my phone and I check the weather. I mean, and it's always on my phone. It's never on my desktop. When I get to work, I check whatever's going on in the world. So, I mean, being able to go from one to the other, now that's the Google odometry or whatever technology that they are doing, and they also can know when you're watching television as well, which is really weird. Yeah. So that's pretty deep. That's pretty deep. But I think the building blocks is what we're talking about. I think device fingerprinting, just if we can provide the fields for them so that some data team can do the rest of the legwork is where I would think. But then go on the next one. Yeah.
For the hashing, it means this doesn't float. That is a simple note that we can mine trivially. The reason an argument that I can see for tracking fields individually is, for example, if Zillow has decided that we're not going to do color depth, that will never be part of our hash, something on their key will never match. But somebody might want to data mine with 80% consistency with Zillow, with 90% of the MLS and the portal having separate
Yeah, but if no one's following the exact same formula, then how do we know? If I'm the broker and I get the data from Zillow, I get it from Bob's Pork Chops and Photos, how do I know it's the same user if one hashtag is going to be different than the other?
This is my point.
Oh.
If we're not using a hashtag, composing it,
Right.
then you get to match at least 3 fields in this case, and these 4 of them, these 2 and start drawing a line between them.
Cool.
Can I create an
Yes.
identity as well? So if you look at
So,
Lot
yeah.
0 that's just next door, they track you.
Sorry, I think we got to press it. There you go.
They can track you basically when you log in, but you can log in with your Twitter account, you can log in with your LinkedIn account, and basically they're going to do cross-reference and add it to your profile. So your profile can end up with 20 accounts. So it's the same thing if you go to one MLS and then you go to Zillow, the login will be different, but you might need a way to actually merge them.
The
that you can
login will be
track
different, but the device should be the same.
Might
and
not.
And the colors. I mean,
I
there's
can log
always
in with
false
I can
positives.
log in with my phone, I can log in with my laptop,
Right.
but if I actually log in, then you have a key. So you know it's me, so you put them, you merge them together, so you have 2 identifiers for me. Then I log into Zillow using my same machine and same email or something like that. And then you can aggregate again.
The only problem when you log in and you're given a key, it's internal and it's proprietary, so
Yeah,
that's not going to be shared. So trying to identify somebody just solely on the client and the server-side information that you can get at the time, and trying to avoid information from other sources might be the best way to start, you know? But I get what you're saying, yeah.
The only problem with avoiding other places
I'll get
to
to
start, but
Sorry.
you need that in order to, if you want to know when they're going Zillow, you need to partner with Zillow or something like that.
Right.
Because if Zillow's not hooked to the MLS, just so the MLS can track the people are
Right.
on their site.
Yeah, no, that would be, so that's kind of what the advertisers do. The advertisers, man, how do they figure this out? They also have UTMs, where are actual fields that go around the URLs that they all can decompose and figure out. They're all talking to each other. Do they meet twice a year? Do they have, I don't know, I'm not in marketing, but they have done a tremendous job of being able to track you. And their cookies last 6 months, you know, that's the standard in those. So how do they, and you know, getting this group to try to make cookies, I don't want to have cookies. Could we get together and create a super cookie? I don't think that, but I'm just one guy. I'm just a caveman. Your world frightens me. But if somebody feels that way, this is where you raise your hand and say that's the way to go. You know, but
I think so. I don't know. I think
I knew you were going to do that. Is that it? You're going to have a 3-word answer and make me walk all the way over here? I don't know. That thing has just got a mind on its own. Press the button. Red means it's on. That's what I learned the wrong way.
There we go. Okay. So, well, I mean, it seems easy to me to have our own super cookie. If it doesn't exist and we make a new identifier, we pass it around. You know, we have our actor ID in the server-side field, and then as they move around, we read the super cookie and we can pair up the server-side data.
Cool.
Seems easy.
Can I see a show of hands? I mean, how many people here believe, it's going to be 2 things, device fingerprinting and super cookie. I just want an opinion. Device fingerprinting is the way to go. Can I see a show of hands in identifying users? Cool. How about a super cookie approach? You better raise your hand.
Why would you use a super cookie in lieu of a JWT?
Anything. You know, it could be a
Yeah,
JSON web
I guess
token,
a-
a cookie,
Yeah.
anything that we could pass around that would.
Where
yeah.
we understand,
Yeah.
like the underground UTM network that marketing people have figured out. We would have to document it, which is cool because we're, guess what, a document organization. Kind of falls in our lap. So yeah, or how about both? I mean, heck, you know, I have nothing to do for the next 3 years. Should we work on both? I don't know. Both might be chaos. What was that?
I think it's an overkill to have both, but I agree, if by cookies we mean, you know, could be a token or a cookie, it makes sense. But how about the browser now? If you go to Safari on go to your Mac, it will actually know it's you.
Yeah.
Because you can continue your session, and Chrome does the same thing now on Android. So if you're on Chrome and I go to my computer on Chrome, it's going to tell me you want to continue your session. Can we get that information? Do you know, anybody knows?
Well, you have to have everyone that makes a request log into the site.
Right.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, Chrome does that on an internal network, whatever they use, WebSockets.
Yeah.
You
But
log
do
in
they
once, you
give?
identify
Do
yourself.
they make
Yeah.
that available to us, or
Yeah.
in the client?
Well, the key would be getting everybody to log in and then sharing that. That might be too big of a task right now. I think if we start with a building block of at least being able to create a way to start to identify them agnostically, you know.
But on
without-
Safari, you're not
and that's
logged in, I
that
think.
might be privacy issues too.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things we got to see. We're not a company like Google or Alphabet. We are an organization, cooperative, working together collaboratively, and we got to watch out for things that I don't understand. Legal. This guy's going to talk
Red
for a
is
while.
on, good. I won't go too deep. I could. The way Apple works on that is you have to log into the iCloud, and then it's sharing your different devices with each other. So each one of those devices is logged into that repository and is querying that data source. A long time ago, I used to work for DoubleClick. Does anybody remember them?
Yes.
The Dark Overlord.
Mhm.
I never worked in the Dart product line. I was in direct marketing. What Dart was doing is they would rent space to deliver an ad on a web page. And when that resource was called up from the various websites, they would get all the metadata from the browser, the IP address of the machine behind the firewall. So this, what do you call that thing? Actor IP. It's almost always going to be 192.168.0. whatever. Always, because we're all behind firewalls. So that's not a huge piece of value. But you get all these different elements together. Even if you got rid of the cookie, they could come back and figure out you were you within a week, just by getting all the metadata and seeing where you go and matching that behavior up using big data within a week. They didn't care. And I heard that in meetings over and over and over again. They said, yeah, delete your cookies, doesn't matter.
The only
Now-
problem with cookies is you're forcing engineering. You know, what if my solution doesn't use cookies? I mean, I hate to force engineering on the bodies that be, whereas
But
client information
here's the
is
point I'm trying to
metadata
make,
that's there in every quest.
Yeah,
so every
here's the
request.
point I'm trying to make. You don't need the cookie
Oh, good. That's where I was getting.
because
Because they injected their publicity into their site, so we can do the same is for partner sites, they can inject our JavaScript.
all right. Next layer down. DoubleClick bought Abacus. Abacus is a direct marketing arm. They knew individuals in households. DoubleClick didn't. They knew how to differentiate different people, but they didn't know who they were. And they could guess on age, they could guess on gender based on their behaviors, but they had no idea who they were marketing to. The reason why Google bought them is because they could not deliver a targeted ad fast enough. So it looked like salt. There was no value add. And that's when their stock price plummeted in like 2 months. It was insane.
Cool. All right, man. This gentleman has something to talk about here on that.
So I guess I had a question about something you mentioned. You said that it was possible to get the IP address behind the firewall, the actual client's IP address. If we can get the client's IP address and we can also get the public IP address, and you concatenate those two, you've got an individual.
That's
Until DHCP.
right.
Well, of course. I mean, that's like
And-
saying
and
I can track
proxy.
you until you clear your cookies. There's going to be some point when it would clear, but the fact is, until that happens, you've got an individual if you've got a public IP concatenated with a local IP. Most people do have 192.168, but you're not going to be 192.168.1 and me be 1 and us have the same public IP. It's impossible.
Well, actually, yeah. Well, if you
If
have-
it's a proxy
if you have
environment,
a router
like
that
here.
has DHCP,
Right?
so tomorrow you will be 2, but 3 days
That only happens if you're offline for a long period of time. Most machines don't actually change IP addresses internally, and your router very rarely changes its public IP. So if I know the IP of your router, and I know your IP internally, sure, there's a chance if I turned off the machine 3 or 4 days later, power on a new one, it could get that IP address. But I mean, if you're looking for something as a starting point, I feel like that, and then you could add extra attributes to that, and you should be able to increase your certainty of
And we
having
have
the right
that
person.
field too. We have the IP address already. We could put a second, I think it's refer IP, or so from what I understand, the server side, there's 2 IPs you can pull. There's in whatever, we could provide the 2 fields for them after we figure out what the standard calls them. But I think that's what you're getting at. The only problem is in a proxy environment, my whole company's coming out the same IP. So you need something else. So the IP is crucial, and it's a good first step, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so to answer some of those questions, if you're on DSL, every time your modem reboots, you get a new public IP. Comcast, cable modems, whenever they're rebalancing the neighborhood, that's when you get a new IP, public side. Companies are static. Okay, when I move from the hotel to my house, that behavior moves with me. So all of the metadata associated with my browser, that becomes more valuable, especially in high transit. So I'm not staying in this hotel. But I've already gotten targeted ads. Google knows I moved. They know where I'm at night. They know where I'm here. And it's subtle. You know, if you're in the industry, you know what to look for. But no, I have an Apple phone.
Great.
I don't use Android because
Thanks,
of the
James.
safety.
No, I think that's a good point, James. But I think part of this is a puzzle. And as an industry, if we just create the fields and the data, the different shops are going to prevail differently. So in your example of an IP changing, you know, when the router gets rebooted, the smart shops, like the guys at homes.com, they're going to know that, hey, wait a minute, the IP has changed, but guess what? The color's been the same for 6 weeks. The depth's been the same, you know, for 17 days. The plugins have stayed the same. The browser version, that's the same person. They're going to have smart, and it's a juggling game. This type of, what we're trying to do at Universal ID is a juggling game. The better shops are going to have a better way of becoming more accurate. Never going to be 100%. But think about that. So, you know, we kind of got to move on to the next thing because unfortunately time's not being our friend. But I think I've gotten great direction from you guys and girls. I think I think there's enough here for us to sink our teeth in on our monthly meetings and hopefully come to a resolution. Anybody else have any last minute thoughts on this subject? Yeah, Jason.
One great thing was
Sure.
mobile apps versus mobile websites, whatever we decided.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Comparing mobile app traffic to mobile website traffic, so any kind of cookie or JavaScript token-based design may not work.
We kind of have, yeah, it may not work, you're right. We kind of have a field right now for the user agent, which that should help. We also have a field somewhere for the device type. I guess I should have put these in a better order. But again, that's information that not everybody can supply, or maybe nothing out of the box is opt-in. So, you know, you may get that. It might be fragmented. So yeah, I think in the user agent it might come out to play though, right? Because the versions will be different, and the OS. So if we stick our teeth with IP, OS, browser versions, that's a good start, and then you know, iron out some of those few things that might be better. So cool. Thanks for playing that along in that discussion. Real quick, then we have after device work with transaction management is another thing. Just basic general direction. Do you guys feel that the internet tracking work group should get involved here? And when I talk about transaction management, I mean activity that happens in transactions digitally in MLS systems specifically. So some MLS systems like Connect MLS have them baked in. Some companies like Instanet Solutions, who now just got bought out by somebody, they have a solution that they sell. DocuSign is another one. So there's stuff that happens there. Documents are downloaded and transactions are happening in there for whatever reasons. There's parties involved in transactions. Is this something we should stick our nose in? Anybody want to talk about it?
Broker is going to work with one transaction management system. So the other concept we've been talking about is
Who's the actor? Out of here saying who's the actor. If we're going to get involved in transaction management, analytic information, who's the actor? So, and I got to always remember, this is different than documents. Documents is an object, and we have that already. We can already provide analytic information sharing on viewing of documents. But in the transaction itself, what are we talking about? Like signatures? I think it came up in our call last that the idea was when somebody clicks on the buy button, and I guess these transaction systems have stuff like that. Should we be providing a share? Is there anybody in here with a transaction system that can provide some feedback or relevance? Bless you. All right. Do you think this is a show of hands? Is this something we should get into, or something we should? Anybody? Show of hands. Is this something the work group should get involved in? I love feedback. Awesome. We'll come back to you if we. Well, that's how this stuff normally works. Somebody will come back with a more clearer vision of what they were trying to get at. Client portals. MLS systems have client portals. Flex MLS has one. Connect MLS has one. Paragon has one. They all have them. Within there, there's some different data that's being tracked. And we thought it might be a good idea to use that as an object and try to make some boutique fields that relate to client portals. I believe even consumer sites have client portals. They must, right? If you can create an account, you're a client portal, I imagine, at homes.com, Zillow, wherever. So what do you guys think? Is this something that we should get involved in as far as creating fields on the client portal specifically? Is there tracking data in the client session that's different than being in the actual system? If I'm viewing a listing in the client portal, is that different? Should that be tracked different? Anybody have any thoughts on the client portal side? Yes.
Just a question. So are you talking about like IDX and everything, right? Would be considered client portal?
Well, no, not really. So IDX I would think of as a separate entity in itself, its own system. But a client portal will be where the user can create sub-users that can log in on their behalf. So in an MLS system, I'm a realtor and you're going to buy a house from me, I'm going to set you up with a login, and that's a client portal. So that's kind of what I was getting at. So.
Don't a lot of IDX vendors have that same type of situation?
Yeah, I would imagine. Pretty much most consumer-facing sites, well, they should have some type of system like that. But yeah, everybody's different. So
that would be different from what you're talking about.
yes, yeah. So but I guess what I was going to get at is there anybody, CoreLogic, do you track client portal activity any different than you do in Matrix?
This was going to be my point. It surprises me that this wasn't already part of this.
Hallelujah. Cool.
Isn't that the point to be able to track to see
Right.
how effective my various campaigns are, how many people have seen my listing that is for sale in a portal, how many people have gone to the
Well, we have the actor type being identifiable as a consumer versus a client. So I think that kind of was the thought early on when we started doing this. The client would then be the registered user. But is there more on the portal side that has different metrics that we're missing? Should we make it an object?
More than the client portal is an option itself.
Yeah. And there are specific activities the realtor's clients do that would be beneficial to track and then share. So I imagine the creating of a client is one, the deleting of a client, but that's more of, we already kind of have that covered. That's a little different. Yes.
We have a customer portal, but we're also using Matrix. And for us, getting the data, how many times a property got searched on Matrix, that's something we would like to get back to actually give our realtors so they can show their customers. That's not just how many times their property appeared on our site, but how many times they got searched by other agents. Right?
I got you. As an MLS executive, I can tell you right now, I'd like to know the production in the client side. Like, I know that the majority of the emails being sent are coming out of the client portal versus directly in the MLS. That's information that we could provide with just a field. You know, in an event, we could just provide some field that indicates it came from the client portal section if somebody wants to use it. That's one way to approach it. Another way is the proposed way of making a whole new object. Making a whole new object means that there's a lot more information that can be tracked there. So out of your solution, do you guys do anything on that, or is it just basically one straight up in the MLS? You don't segregate it versus sections in the MLS, like
No, we are inside of the client portals of most of the major MLSs, inside of Matrix, inside of Paragon, inside of Flex, inside of Rapatoni. Specifically in the client portal, that's obviously
Cool.
a key metrics that the agent, the broker, the MLS themselves would like to know about. So we're already in there, and we measure that engagement of content through that portal in the same manner that we do through an IDX site or otherwise. But we do differentiate it in that we recognize that it's in they're actively working with an agent. So
Right,
that
that's
we
important.
We treat them a little differently in that
Cool.
regard.
Well, it sounds like we got enough feedback on this to pursue it in phone calls in one way or the other. Definitely a lot more than that silly transaction management. Who put that on there? What an idiot did that.
You were just making sure we were awake.
Yeah, I guess. New objects we should focus on. You know, this comes up with every phone call. So, you know, what I would say at this point is if you have some new objects you think internet tracking should focus on, again, think real estate data and think tracking the end user. What are we missing here? We got a lot of good objects out there: property listing, open house, document, virtual tour. So, but what are we missing? There's got to be something that we're always trying to achieve and that we're overlooking. So you can help by calling. We meet every third Wednesday of every month, and just pick up the phone. And if you don't want to, if you want to listen once in a while, that's fine. If you just want to call and listen and be the authoritative figure in your organization that knows what we're up to, but that's great too. However you want to participate, check out the notes in our Confluence page. And then lastly, implementation is really something that I ask at every meeting. I mean, right now, implementation is important because we're live, we're published. Anybody have any suggestions on how we can help with implementation? Like a bounty? I was thinking of a bounty, like when they give you a reward for finding a bug. Can we do anything like that? I don't know. I just thought of that.
So obviously, ListTrack, not only are we collecting the data, but we're looking at means of disseminating it back out.
Cool.
So we are working with different MLSs in terms of adopting the RESO standard for publishing out those metrics in aggregate back to the MLS, and we also are working with brokers and others in a similar fashion.
That's awesome. So there's a commerce here. There's a company, ListTrack's doing a great job of trying they've been doing it for a while, and then now that we're published, they're going to provide a data stream. I imagine MLS executives are going to be asking their MLS vendors, FBS, to try to help them with providing a data stream that's going to be compliant at some point, and I think that's going to echo out. Maybe in a year we're going to be doing, it's going to be easier and easier. Kind of like ListTrack's, if their trajectory is not, remember, progress isn't always linear, ListTrack's wasn't, so, but they are now at a much higher point than they were even last year, so that's probably how we're going to follow. As this is new, this is big data. A lot of people don't even know how to handle big data. As they get more comfortable with it, I think our resource in the data dictionary is going to grow more and more useful, and that's kind of just my prediction. So thanks a lot, guys. I'm going to go ahead and segue over to Ada Hassan from ListTrack. He's going to give you a fancy, informative demonstration of the product. Thanks, everyone.
So my name's Ata Hassan. I'm with ListTrack. I know many in the room. A lot of you are early or current adopters of our product, but as Chris alluded to, we've been doing this for some time. So some of the things he's touched on, we've been actively working on for the last 3 years or so. So ultimately our goal is kind of how it all started. There we go. How it all started is as a team, we've been working in the real estate space for the last 13, 14 years. You probably know Trent. I think he's out there. He's on the circuit a lot more than me. And we built a lot of systems in the real estate space. We worked with Black Knight. We worked with CoreLogic. We helped build out some MLS platforms, tax platforms, a variety of things. And always, every time we built out these platforms, so we were a software shop. We're based out of here in San Diego. Every time we built out those platforms, there was more so than not an analytics component to it, provide feedback to the owner of the application, what kind of engagement it was getting, etc. And so about 3 years back or so, we thought, wow, wouldn't it be great, the wouldn't it be great moment where if we could see these kind of metrics across all the places where content was disseminated. So you have obviously an agent, a broker, goes through, back in the day it was syndication, goes through IDX, goes into the MLS, etc. But there was no, one place where a broker, an agent, a seller could go to take a look and see how that content is being engaged with. So that was kind of the birth of ListTrack. So what we did is we started actively working with some of the early adopters. Number 1 and number 2 for us were Gamels and Sandicor. Sandicor is our local MLS here, I'm sure everybody knows. And so Ray was gracious enough to set up meetings for us with local brokers, and we had some workshops, and we sat at round tables and kind of discussed, what are some of the things they would be looking for in in a platform like that, in terms of, a platform that would allow them to measure how their listings are being engaged with. And so these are some of the things that we heard pretty more so than not. The silo thing was big. No broker wants another broker to see how their listings are performing. So obviously that's true. But at the same time, if let's say I'm a Century 21 agent, I still want to see how my listing is doing across the web, even if it was on a Berkshire site. But Berkshire doesn't want you to know that was on Berkshire. So that ability to keep things in silos and personalize how the content is presented to you, whether you are, like we said, with broker A versus broker B, how it's presented to you, whether we call out a specific site or don't call out a specific site. So that was also big. Obviously, reporting and verifiable. So they were looking for what was happening today, or at that time when we were talking to people, is brokers had somebody on their staff that would once a week or once a day or whatever the frequency was, would be calling out to the different major publishers, Zillow, Trulia, Homes, Realtor, etc., and they'd get some kind of file, a CSV file or something. And they had somebody in-house who would take these CSV files and combine it together into one and aggregate it and put together some charts and tables and everything. And a week later, boom, they have a report that they could, which was probably now 2 weeks late in terms of data. So they're looking for something a little more timely and also verifiable, meaning like it's not just some publisher saying, yeah, you got 20 views and 30 leads or whatever. So some way of them being able to look at that and validate and verify that these metrics are fairly accurate. Access was also kind of ties together with the hierarchy in terms of who I am logging into the system. If I'm an MLS exec, I want one view. If I'm a broker, I want a different view. If I'm an office manager, I want a third view. If I'm an agent, a different one. If I'm a seller, if I'm a holding company, a completely different view. So these are all the things that we kind of took into this puzzle, and we built it. So there were 3 major components to us building out ListTrack. Really, we had, how do we capture the data? And how do we organize the data? And then lastly, how do we distribute or disseminate that data back out? So we'll go through each of these and we'll see. So in terms of capture, that's kind of what part of what the RESO standard is about. I think they're more so about the distribute than the capture, because there's a variety of ways that you can capture the data. It can be via an API, it could be via file, it could be via JavaScript, it could be some other methodology in which how you capture the metrics. What we decided to do was use a method that is more so common than not, rather than us relying upon the publisher or the vendor self-reporting the data to us. We took an approach more like a model of what Google Analytics and other web metrics platforms do. So we have a JavaScript snippet that allows people to embed that onto the listing detail page, and then it reports back all of the things that we're looking for, all the things that are accounted for in the RISO standard, and more, because this idea of following the person when they go from one browser to the next, and even from one device to the next, become a reality when you do it in this method versus some of the other methods. So what we've done in terms of the capture, we tried to streamline the process. So we started with the MLSs, because we knew that the MLSs is where the data is being disseminated from. That's where all the contracts are in place, and that's where the data feeds are licensed. So we started with the MLSs, and we worked with them, recognizing that there was a void in this space to provide these metrics for MLS execs, brokers, et cetera. And so we provide a self-serve platform that allows all of their IDX vendors to register, and they log in, and just like any other, like we said, Google Analytics or otherwise, you register, you pick your publisher, you register, it generates an account number for you, and then it gives you an outline of the steps that you require to implement ListTrack within your website. Many of you may have already done this, I'm not sure, or otherwise, but it's just basically it's a JavaScript that passes to us a listing ID, a zip code, and some other parameters. And so part of that capture method is when we work with the MLS, we also get a RETS feed from them. So then when the metric comes in with that listing ID and that zip code, then we correlate it back to a particular listing that's known to be with a certain MLS, that's known to belong to a certain agent, that's known to belong to a certain office, broker, et cetera. So we have that whole hierarchy now that allows us to present that view of that metric for the different stakeholders in the process. Let me come up here. It doesn't seem to be. And so in terms of the organization of it, what we're doing now is, like we said, we have two different ways in which we're providing, well, not only two, we have multiple ways in which we present the data to the end user. In the platform itself, in the ListTrack platform itself, we have a dashboard that shows in aggregate, depending upon the role of the user that's logged into the system. If they're an MLS exec, they see in aggregate across the entire inventory of the MLS how many views they have that they've seen in the last day, week, month. And this is all in real time, so they can even see intraday reporting of how many views that they've received for a given publisher. And when we do it at the MLS level, we strictly roll it up to the publisher level. So we don't call out any explicit sites. We don't say this is Coldwell Banker. We don't say this is Berkshire Hathaway. We just say that this is Real Estate Webmasters or something like that. So we call it out at the vendor name versus actually disclosing who the broker is, et cetera. And then beyond that, if you're a different role where you actually own some of the listings, i.e. you're the listing agent, you're the co-listing agent, or you're the broker of that, then in turn you have, besides that dashboard, which in turn would be limited to your inventory and an aggregation of your inventory, but if you're, let's say, a Berkshire Hathaway broker, we explicitly call out Berkshire Hathaway sites. So we can, based upon the referrer host of that account coming in, we know that. So we segregate based upon that. We segregate specific to the brand, and we call it out. And then they can drill in even further to say, I want to look at listing level statistics. Again, so with the listing level statistics, we show the similar types of activity, which includes how many views, how many times was it favorited, how many leads were generated, how many times was it shared on social media. We continue to build upon this. The galleries, the open houses, and we're bringing in other data sets also into it. We also, an interesting piece, what we do when you're looking at a listing level statistics is we also blend in hot sheet activity. So when we show the trends of what type of activity you're seeing, how many leads you're generating, if there was hot sheet activity, we depict that on the charts or on the graphs to show like there was a price drop, and based upon that you see the trend of the chart turn upwards or otherwise. So we do that. We also are looking to blend in other sources like open house, as we mentioned, And there will be some things that we have coming down the pipe that I think will add value to that. Now, in terms of the distribution itself, so like we said, we have that concept of all the different roles and the different custom categories, and we brand it. So it's interesting because what we've done is we started off working with MLSs, and then ultimately now we are working with large brokers across the nation. And they have their own different needs. So an MLS view is different than a broker view, but under the hood, it's the same data, but the way we present it and distribute it is different. So for instance, if I'm a Berkshire Hathaway broker, it's going to be tailored with my branding versus if the MLS is going to be with their branding. And the way we aggregate the data is going to be slightly different. The way we call out the sites is going to be slightly different. But under the hood, the data is all the same. And so our two real means of distributing the data is through the website itself, ListTrack itself, which each of our accounts has its own subdomain. And like we said, it's branded, and there's seller reports and agent reports, and which can go out on an ad hoc basis. They can go out weekly, they can go out monthly. And then when the seller report goes out, it's branded, of course, specific to the broker or to the agent, depending upon how that is configured. And then this is where we're also looking to take into consideration in our API, which today we have an API, and a lot of MLSs are consuming it, brokers are consuming it. We have publishers also that are consuming it and trying to bring this data into their site so that they can not only show how that listing is performing on their site, but they also show to the owner of the listing how their listing is performing holistically. So we're looking to move in this regard to the new API that's being proposed through RESO. So we're working with 2 or so MLSs actively in terms of moving our API to support that standard. So I think that's going to be kind of the first implementation from a standpoint of having scale of the RESO API. So that'll be very interesting. I mean, in terms of where we're at, we'll touch on this in a later slide, but we started off in the beginning, like we said, just with GAMLs and Sandicor, but now we're in over 100,000 different domains where our website monitoring is in place. That equates to about 70 different vendors or so. So this is kind of, a picture's worth 1,000 words here. So this is an MLS view. And so with an MLS, we have these these different roles. So you have MLS staff, you'll have a broker, you'll have a team, you'll have an office, you'll have an agent, you have a seller. So this is, as you're seeing here, this is a listing level view. It's kind of hard to see some of the things, which is probably good. But so what we've done, it's very interesting. One of the things we set out from the very beginning is, you've got these national portals that have huge traction, the Zillows, the Trulias, the Realtors, et cetera, and we hear that over and over. But there was always this hypothesis that if you were to, in aggregate, roll up IDX or in aggregate roll up MLS traffic, that it would possibly overtake or at least be a competing force up against those large national portals. I can't say that we see that all over the place, but we are seeing that is true in some markets. So you can see there on that left bar, there's a purple bar, a lilac bar, and an orange bar. That's for IDX vendors in that market rolled up. So we roll up all IDX vendors, and then they have the ability to select on that link and drill in, and it shows in detail which are the vendors that are attributed to that IDX category. That's the lilac bar is specifically related to that listing, how many views for that broker. The orange bar, the other thing is we can do as a result of having the RETS feed, is we look for properties or listings that the broker or the MLS deems to be quote unquote similar, basically comps. So we identify comps and we provide an indication to the broker, agent, or seller as to how their listing is performing up against comps within that market. So that's what the orange bar is there. So you'll see within the IDX category, that listing is, seems to be outperforming other comps within the area. Right next to that, you'll see some of the larger publishers. And you can see in this case, in aggregate, IDX has more views than some of these large national publishers. That's not always the case. It depends on the listing. It depends on the market. There's so many factors that come into play. But the hypothesis that we set out early, in some cases, we have discovered to be true. So this is, like we said, this is the MLS view. And this same listing, if that agent logs into the MLS, this is what they would see. Whereas if they log into their broker instance of ListTrack, they see that same listing, but it's a slightly different flavor. Now, rather than just IDX, we call it out. This broker is Daniel Gale, so we call out danielgale.com, which happens to be their site, which clearly the broker or the agent or the seller wants to see that they're getting that type of traction. And then you see right next to it, Daniel Gale outperforming Zillow. You see right next to that, MLSLI.com, and you see Realtor.com, and you see all the others. So there is some variances in it. As you can see in aggregate up the top, we roll up to show how many views. We roll up to show how many leads, how many times it was shared, how many favorites. And then if I had a pointer, you could see that little green combo box gives you a means to say, I want to see it intraday. I want to see over the last week. I want to see it over the last month. So a lot of people in the room may be familiar with this. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe you have it. Maybe your MLS has adopted it. So it may be familiar. Up at the top bar itself, you have some actions that you can take to schedule reports. Like we said, you can schedule the seller report. The seller report can go out in an ad hoc manner. It would go out with their branding. It can go out scheduled on a weekly basis. And so it gives that, it shows, the standard story we hear, right? The agent, the broker wants to show, really, when you put a listing out there and you disseminate it through all these different sites, it's a marketing campaign. My job is to sell my product. The product is your home, and that's my listing. And so I'm trying to show you through this what I'm doing from a marketing standpoint and whether or not we're doing a good job or not. In this case, it looks like they're doing a great job. They're outperforming others in the market, and so it allows the seller to stay in tune with what is happening, the job that the agent is doing. So after we built all that, like we said, this was in 2014. It seems longer sometimes, but it was. Then they came. So we started off with a handful of vendors, 1 or 2 MLSs in 2014. We went back and forth with a lot. It's been a challenge on multiple fronts, but I think it's been snowballing for some time now. You can see in 2015, we moved to a cloud-based architecture, and so we did that in anticipation of, thinking like, if this thing takes off, we've got some major sites out there that are going to be reporting traffic in huge numbers. So our architecture needs to support that. So what we have in place is it's a fire and forget. So that JavaScript goes on the page. It's an asynchronous call out. The whole web tier is hosted on Microsoft Azure, and so it'll spawn as many VMs as we need. So right now, I think we do. I have some notes here. I just asked right before I came. I don't think it's on this slide, but either way, I think we do about 25 to 30 million hits per hour we have coming across to our server. So that equates to about, I think it peaks for about 6 hours per day, which equates to about 5 billion hits per year. And we only see that growing. So that's coming in, and we have that, like we said, hosted out in the cloud. And it doesn't come, we don't process it immediately. It's near real time. When it comes into that, it's like we said, it's fire and forget. It's completely asynchronous. It then goes into what Microsoft Azure calls their service bus. Service bus is like their new queuing technology. So it goes into a queue, and then from there we have a process every 15 minutes that's picking up that stuff and bringing it to our back end, and then all the jobs for aggregation, et cetera. So that comes to physical hardware on our back end, which is all SQL Server. So the full stack is Microsoft. And so that's physical hardware, the SQL Server backends. We have multiple redundant SQL servers. And then even on the cloud-based, obviously, we have it across 3 different territories within the nation, and we spawn as many VMs as necessary. The moment we exceed a certain threshold, another VM spawns. So pretty standard, in terms of today's typical architectures. But we feel confident that based upon the volumes we see today and the volumes we anticipate seeing tomorrow, that we have no problem. We've never had any downtime. We've never had any complaints from any sites whatsoever in terms of having impact. That's always a thing you hear, like, well, oh, it's a performance hindrance and this and that. Well, you go to all these sites and they've got, in some cases, over 100 different pixels being dropped today, marketing-based pixels or otherwise. So I'm not a big believer in that, we can't design, that we're going to cause any kind of performance problem. So we've shown it thus far. Like we said, we're in some of the largest MLS systems in the nation, including Matrix. In CoreLogic, in Matrix 7, list track is built in. It is a feature that can be enabled on behalf of the MLS. So we're, like we said, not only in Matrix, we're also inside of Flex, we're also inside of Rapatoni, we're also inside of Paragon. So we've never, those, from an MLS perspective, the 70 or so, as you can see in 2017 up to now, we're in 70 or so of the largest MLSs. We're in the largest MLSs in the nation, and we are inside of their MLS systems, and we haven't had a hiccup. So I don't want to jinx anything, but I don't think that there's any, and the pushback in terms of it being problematic for performance or otherwise, I don't think is a valid one. I think that is it for me. I don't know if there's any kind of questions related to the architecture, where we're at.
I think you're out of time. Sorry.
I don't know if there are any questions. No?
No question?
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.